We'd like to call the special city council meeting to discuss budget to order. Welcome any listening audience that we may have. Madam Clerk, the council microphones are now open for roll call.
Mayor Artis.
Here.
Councilmember Akeson. Councilmember Sear. Councilmember Grayeb. Councilmember Jensen. Here. Councilmember Montalongo. Councilmember Moore. Here. Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Here.
And Councilmember Turner. You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'd like to invite everyone to join us and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk.
We're at regular business. 17-326 is a communication from the city manager and finance director comptroller with a request to continue discussion on the 2018-19 biennial budget.
Thank you. The city manager is prepared to give us an outline of what we're going to try to get accomplished here this evening, and including a short deck presentation. And Mr. Manager, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening, what I thought that we could do is walk through several items that we've had some discussion about. I have some report backs that I want to follow up with you on, and that we can get some direction from you on some CIP requests, on some revenue items, in anticipation of coming back to you next Tuesday night as we continue this budget discussion. One thing I'd like to maybe defer any discussion on as we go forward would be the discussion of the recommendations on reducing an engine company in the fire department. There's still kind of some moving parts. I've got some additional information that we've put together in a report back for you that you'll have that came from the chief and from some CAD data that we have that we put together for you. But with all the moving parts, I think, that are going on right now, and you know, we did have an alternative suggestion to possibly look at an alternative to not decommissioning a machine. That would necessitate, I think, a little input from others but outside of the horseshoe. I'd just like to hold off on that for the time being and see where some of those discussions may take place. So tonight would be to talk specifically about some of the capital recommendations that we have, and then to go into a more meaningful discussion on some of the revenue items that are in the budget, and then revenue items that have come up from you that aren't in the budget, to get some direction from you if there's something you'd like to see in there. And our intent would be that we would have another meeting on the 31st where we will present to you ordinances for some of the revenue items that are in the budget, but that we would try and bring everything forward and wrap this up for a final adoption of the budget by November 7th if we can. So there's a lot of work to do over what amounts to 3 meetings, but I think it could be done, and we can basically wrap everything up at that point in time. So if we could just, you have a handout in front of you that is the budget report backs that we have, and I just wanted to quickly walk through those. The first, we put a couple of paragraphs together on the concept of elevating the EEO manager to a department head level chief diversity officer or chief inclusion officer, and we just gave you some information on that. Report back 7.2 provides some additional information on the decision to select truck 14. That's included there for you. Item 7.3 is, the report back 7.3 are some of the costs of fixing the bathroom in Station 4. So we put some of that together for you, as well as a recap of some of the work orders that have been at Station 4. Report back 7.4 is just a quick report back on the item, the revenue item that Councilman Euler brought up about a public safety fee, if we could look at something along those lines in lieu for non-property tax paying entities. And so we still have some more research that we have to do on that one. Report back 7.5 was how much revenue would be generated by the A tax if we increased it 1 percentage point. So we gave you that. Information is there for you. Item 7.6 is a report back. As we looked at some of the revenue streams, we tried to ascertain what would be one-time kind of revenue bumps that would be constant at that level or at an approximate level of that, and then what were others that might grow with inflation. And so there's a little report back for you on those. The data behind the report on 6.1, everyone should have got a copy of the 10-year projections that included the detailed expense and revenues that are there. So you should have that, and there's a link to that where it's on our webpage. And then I got an email today from Councilman Ruckriegel just asking a quick report back that we were able to put together pretty quickly, which was on a $100,000 house, what do the property taxes look like? What are the property taxes paid in the city of Peoria? And so we broke it out both in Peoria Public Schools and in District 323, so you can see the difference there between the taxes that are generated. And then we also included some median home values that are listed there as well. And then lastly, the span of control for the fire department was included. There was a report back from the chief that he gave for Councilwoman Moore. So that's kind of a quick summary of everything that we whipped up for you in 48 hours, and we have that for your perusal, and we can certainly, if you have questions on it, we can go and talk about those tonight, or we can certainly defer action on that until the 31st. What we wanted to do was this evening was to talk about some of the CIP requests that we have, and then maybe get some direction in the form of votes from the council that, again, these would be binding in preparing the appropriation and levy ordinance as you give us direction and take the votes this evening. And we would come back to you with that, as I said, on November 7th. But we have 3 items that were out there that were in question that I wanted to talk to you this evening about. The first is the Drees Lane project as part of establishing the stormwater utility. As the Public Works staff has looked at it, we think that there may be an opportunity to utilize existing resources to remodel the space that we have. And so we would recommend at this time that we remove that $2 million from the CIP and the $2 million of debt service, or not debt service, of bonds that would have paid for it. So that would be the first. The second, we've had some discussions with the library about the library's HVAC system. At this time, we'd like to hold off on the Lakeview portion of that. I think it's only about $100,000 of the total. But we'd also like to reduce the bonding amount down to $1,500,000. And then they have a capital reserve account in their fund balance that they would then draw down a portion of the fund balance for the remainder of that capital project. So I think that the total project was about $1.6 million, and we've included a 10% contingency fee. So there may not, if they're able to land this on the 1.6, there may not be a need necessarily for any or a significant use of fund balance at all. And then the last capital item that we have that's out is the discussion, I think, that of do we go forward with the water company due diligence. We did include that in the budget, and I think that's a discussion we want to get some direction on this evening from you as well.
Okay. And for clarification, Mr. Manager, the discussion was had with Councilman Rodrigo, who is our liaison to library, and we
Yes.
have several members of the board here and administration as well. So, Councilman Rodrigo, I don't know if you wanted to address that. I just want to make sure that the council knows that that isn't something that we just put in there without a consultation with you and the board.
Correct. And just, thank you, Mayor. And this is an item that was deferred from last year budget to be able to make the budget balance. And this item truly is a critical need. Our Main Street Library serves a big section of our community. There's a lot of community meetings there. It's also serves as a warming center, a cooling center, depending on the temperatures, and the use is pretty amazing what actually happens in that building. What we've got is we've got the original heating and cooling system that's in there from day one. We've been able to limp that system along for a number of years, but if that system goes down, there are no more parts available. We've got to have them, for the most part, custom made to be able to do that. And when that system goes down, we could be offline for an extended period of time. This is a critical need that was pushed off again 12 months ago to be able to balance that budget, and I'd like to make sure that that gets done this time. There are no windows even in the library, so if this goes down, there's no way to operate that building.
Thank you for the clarification. I just want to make sure everybody knew that this was a thorough discussion with you and the board and board members. And I would like to also maybe just take a minute, because some people may not have noticed that on Tuesday night at our meeting, the director and several of the board members were here until the bitter end of that meeting as well. They're here again tonight. They always are in good attendance during these budget discussions, and gives us an opportunity to thank them for their service to our community and for everything they're doing at the library. So, Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just echo what Councilmember Rodrigo indicated about the necessity for this the heating and cooling system at the downtown library. And I would like for you to remember when Salvation Army had to close a program where people could not go to them until, well, they couldn't go to them at all. And during that time, I'm sure the library didn't know that they were going to become the second line of defense for those people when it was hot outside. And when I would go there, it was full of folks, and I thought, man, what's going on here? Oh, okay. And then I saw the bags and everything. And it was folks from the Salvation Army who they had no place else to go. And on Saturdays, next door, when First Federated Church has their, they have a food bank, not food bank, what am I thinking? Yes, the Loaves and Fishes. A lot of folks are there that come from the church when that's over. I don't know how many of us around the Horseshoe, besides myself and Councilmember Rodrigo, have been to the main branch library, but if you go as often as we do, you'll see that library branch is used quite a bit. It would be the equivalent of us not fixing the heating and cooling system here in City Hall and just saying, well, we'll get to it. Well, this is the main edifice for folks coming through our city for all kinds of purposes, and subsequently, so is the downtown library. That's the main branch for the whole system, and if that goes down, or worse yet, you have books that get destroyed because we didn't take care of the system, that would be a shame. So I hope my colleagues will find that this is a critical need. It's in my district, so naturally I'm going to also want that to happen because I see what happens on a daily basis over there, and then it would allow us to go ahead and provide this service. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the manager on any of these three capital items? If not, we would entertain separate motions on each one, so we'll just take them in order. Have to have your light on, so I know you want. Okay.
Sorry.
Councilwoman Jensen.
I guess my question is the water company due diligence. You're asking us to use $400,000 for that?
I think the question, and I'm just trying to make sure that we have it. We had included it in, and so the question, I think, is just, do you want to keep those dollars in as part of the due diligence, or do you want to remove that? And I think that's the question for you as the council. I think there was some sentiment at a prior budget meeting that was stated that maybe we should take those dollars out, but we did include it in the budget, so that's just a question of, do you want to keep it in, or do you want to take it out?
And I guess as a follow-up, my understanding is that some members of the CEO Council have offered to pay that $400,000 or whatever the due diligence cost is. But that's what I've been told. I don't know if somebody can confirm that that offer's been made.
To my knowledge, there's been a lot of discussion about that. Nothing, we have not received anything official with that on it. That's, whether they do or not, it's undetermined.
Okay, because I think that's a huge factor. If that's on the table and the council wants to accept that, then we could take $400,000 from the CIP budget and put it somewhere else. So I guess it'd be nice if we could get an answer to that before we have to vote on a budget.
One of the discussions that's been ongoing is in a budget that is $8 million in the red, do we have almost $500,000 to spare for this? And that's why the earlier discussion was to take that out. So
Sorry, go ahead.
we can vote it up or down. And I would say that if anybody wants to leave it in there until they can determine that, then vote no.
Okay, because just as a follow-up, I'm in favor of exploring and doing due diligence, but I would much rather do it if the CEO Council's willing to pay for it. So I do think it's relevant, and it would be helpful if we had an answer to that before we have to vote on things.
The only response to that would be is that if you would prefer that they pay for it and we don't have any money in the budget for it, it's probably more likely that may happen.
Right. I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Councilwoman Moore.
I'd like to simplify the issue by saying I'd like to remove the $400,000 for the water company due diligence, and if I could reserve $30,000 of that for the fire company for bathroom and remodel, that would be great. And my request to remove the due diligence funds is really out of, I was having a conversation with someone about what you want and what you need. Okay, what do you need? You may want to own a luxury mansion, but you just really need someplace to live. And so one thing is necessary, another thing is optional. And right now, for this budget, $400,000 is optional. And if, in fact, as Councilmember Jensen has indicated, that there is talk on the street that someone wants to come and help with that's a wonderful thing, because I'm not suggesting that we don't do due diligence. I'm suggesting that we can't afford $400,000 in this budget. Thank you.
And we're going to do these in separate motions. So the first one is just on Dries Lane, and that's a straightforward. The request was in to do some construction out there to accommodate stormwater management. The manager and Director Reese decided we didn't need to spend that money. So this one is this is just taking that out of the capital budget.
I do have a question about that one. Wasn't that line item $3 million? It was just $2 million? Then may I make a motion that we remove the $2 million?
Okay,
For this
motion
2018.
seconded by Councilman Riggenbach. Further discussion on this item? It's to take it out of the CIP.
Right.
Drop
it. Yeah.
Dries Lane, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'm seeing no lights. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes with 10 ayes, 1 nay. Councilmember Sear. The next item is the library, so we would be reducing that project to $1.76 million, and the bonding would be $1.5 million. Questions or motion? Councilman Reckriegel. Okay.
I'd make the motion to keep this in the budget.
Okay. Seconded by Councilwoman Moore. Is there any other discussion on this item? Councilwoman Jensen?
Clarification question. So is it, your motion is to keep it in the budget, but with the modification, right? Okay.
Yeah. So this would be the 1.5 with reduction of the 2.6, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. And the final on this page is the taking the due diligence, removing that, or whatever the motion is. This is to remove it. Does anybody want to make a motion on that? Councilwoman Moore? And seconded by Councilmember Turner. Discussion. Councilman Euler.
I just would like to comment that I think it's irresponsible to take this out of the budget when we haven't had the discussion on whether or not we're going to go forward with it.
Okay. I think that in terms of my vote, not thinking it's irresponsible because we've had a lot of time to consider this, my vote is a no vote based on an $8 million deficit. And so I would probably not consider, or at least ask that you don't consider my vote irresponsible because I don't think yours is. But that's my reason for supporting this. There will be discussion on the due diligence and whether or not we're going to do it. There has to be. Okay. Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we should keep it in the budget for it being a responsible thing for us to do the due diligence, especially if it's going to be new revenue into the city at some point.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Jensen.
I guess this is to the city manager. If this passes to keep it in the budget and then the CEO council makes an offer, we can move that money then somewhere else? Does it have to remain in the CIP, or can things from CIP be moved to the general?
I think that, no, I think that you could do it both ways. I mean, if you left it in and the CEO council came and said, we're going to fund this, you could reduce the amount of funding that you have that's approved in the budget. We can adjust the budget downward. Conversely, if you take it out and then they still come back and say, hey, we want to fund this, you can say, go pay for it. And I mean, so I think you can do it either way.
So if it's in the CIP budget that we pass, and then we get money from the CEO council, we can move that anywhere in the budget, or can we only move it within the CIP?
We're talking about CIP dollars
Okay.
in the CIP fund, so it would stay within that fund.
And so then my follow-up question is, if we vote not to fund the due diligence, that $400,000, does it still stay in the CIP?
What we would reduce the spending down by $400,000, and that would reduce the expense down by $400,000. So it would increase fund balance by $400,000, or we would have in the fund, because we're not spending
In the capital
in the capital
improvement fund?
Correct.
Okay.
And the capital fund, at this point in time, still owes the general fund some money. Director Scroggins, about $6 million. So
You hear what he said?
it's about $6 million of money that is owed to the general fund. So in essence, what it does, from a cash perspective, if you don't spend it, that's $400,000 of additional cash that comes back to the general fund.
Okay, so it could go back to the general fund, but in that route?
In that way. It's not like dollars that we would be available to spend elsewhere. So you can spend it on capital, but knowing that we also still have that deficit we're trying to chip away at in the capital budget to repay the debts that they owe the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Atkinson.
Thank you. I apologize for being late. I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa until about 5:30. I drove back and got in at around 5:30. Anyway, yeah. So I apologize if this has already been covered. We're talking about the CIP. After this is made, after this vote, are we finished talking about CIP requests?
No, if there, we would be more than happy to entertain other questions the council has. If they have CIP questions, we'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. These were the ones that were identified like 2 or 3 meetings ago. So, but anything.
No, I just didn't
everything's-
know it was
yeah.
teed up, and I missed the teeing it up, so I apologize.
Thank you. Thanks for rushing back. Thanks for rushing back from Cedar Rapids to be here. Thank you. And just for clarification, the motion on the floor is to take it out. So if it passes, you kind of said it different. You know it. Okay, so the motion is to delete it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm not seeing any more lights. Last call. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes with 6 ayes, 4 noes. Voting no, council members Akison, Sear, Montalongo, and Euler. Okay. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. So moving on, well, maybe at this point in time, since we were talking capital, if council has any specific capital requests now or questions about the capital budget, we would be happy to answer those. I think we have, between the Public Works Director and the department heads and the Finance Director, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions.
Okay. I have Councilmember Moore and then Councilwoman Akison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were at the original budget meeting, we talked about, one of the things you suggested that we reduce was mowing of private lots. How many private lots do we mow?
Well, I'm going to ask Director Black to come forward and talk about what we end up doing as far as work orders on private lots and the amount that we have. So.
On a typical annual basis, we would issue work orders on approximately 35 to 4,000 lots throughout the city, privately owned lots. Not all of them would be for cutting, some of them would be for just garbage and litter, but the vast majority would be for cutting plus garbage and litter.
So 3,500 to 4,000 private lots that would go unmaintained.
Well, let me qualify that. We issue between 3,500 and 4,000 work orders. There may be repeat offenders, so they're not 3,500 unique lots. That's probably closer to perhaps 1,700, somewhere in that basis. But yes, without having the weed and litter money in the operating budget for the Community Development Department, we would not be able to cut any privately owned vacant lots that have grass or weeds in excess of 10 inches.
Excess of 10 inches, and you said about 1,700?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And where would you estimate, what percentage of those 1,700 would you estimate is in the first district?
70%?
70?
70.
70%. And what percentage of that 30 that's left is in the second district?
I would say if it was 70% in the first district, it's probably 20% in the third district. And then the majority of the rest of that would be in the second district, with very few in the fourth and fifth district.
Okay. So in my head, I'm doing quick math of 70% of 1,700. 9, 4, 7, 19, 11. That's 1,119 about. That's quick math. Wow.
I'll take your word for it.
So let's say 1,100 to be even. So you're suggesting that the first district, and primarily the south side, should be subjected to 1,100 properties with 10 inches or more weeds growing, and that should be okay. And I'm saying, oh, that was rhetorical, I'm sorry. That's unacceptable, because the community development, the code enforcement folks have been working so hard to rein in things. And then now to say, well, you guys work so hard, we're going to let 1,100 properties just go to seed on you in this 2018. What was the point of all that work that they did? It really would probably be very disheartening to some of them who have come through. And yes, it's a major undertaking to get after these folks on these private lots and to build them and that kind of thing. But I cannot sit here and allow 70% of those properties, or 20% in the 3rd district and the other 10 in the second district, what we often called our heritage neighborhoods, to go to seed. That's unacceptable. And if we need to look at our budget, and when I was talking about the funding for the water due diligence, you heard me say I wasn't saying that we don't need to do diligence. That wasn't what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that there are things that you need right now, and that's not something that we can afford to pay right now. And I'm suggesting that we cannot afford to let 1,100 properties, 1,700 altogether, go to seed in the 3rd district and the 1st district and the 2nd district. Rather, I'd like to look at this budget, and if there's a piece of equipment that we were going to buy, because I remember flipping through here and we were going to replace some vehicles. Well, maybe they hit 105,000 miles. I don't know when we start replacing vehicles. But my car has 225,000 miles on it. And I maintain that vehicle so that I'm trying to get it to 300,000 miles and beyond before I need to replace it. So if we need to pull back on replacing a few vehicles and let them rack up a few more miles so that we can maintain these neighborhoods, and that's what I want to do. But I'm not going to sit here and allow 1,700 lots to go 10 inches or higher for the rest of the summer and not do anything about it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Akison?
Thank you. So my request to speak was to ask about another potential CIP budget item, but I need to respond or ask some questions, so I have some clarifications based on what Councilwoman Moore just said. So, Director Black, just so that I'm clear on this, there are 1,700 properties that the city finds themselves in the position of needing to mow because the property owners are not mowing them, or is it these are city-owned lots that we're not mowing?
No, the 1,700, the guesstimate, which I think is close that I came up with, these would be privately owned lots only. The Public Works Department has a separate budget for the maintenance of not only city-owned parcels, but also parcels that are held by the trustee on behalf of all the taxing bodies that the city pays to maintain.
Okay, so the negligent property owners now, okay, there's a work order, we mow them, and then we charge them back for that mowing, correct? And then I'm waiting to hear, but they never pay us back. Is that right?
I would say they almost never pay us back.
Okay, so maybe what we really do need to do is stop mowing those yards so that we create the tension that is going to require some change. And that leads me into this next request. I've had several conversations with the chief of police, with our IT service, with Director Black, and city manager about our problem of not being able to measure what's going on in the city. And if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. And I don't know if the rest of you know this, but we cannot, Director Black cannot give us a list of the worst performing landlords in the city. Our chief of police cannot give us a list of the number of missing persons by age, race, or gender. And Mr. City Manager, help me with the next one. What is the other area that we cannot,
Nuisance properties, when we were talking about land.
well, that's the landlords. Landlord, missing people, I'll have to go back to my email.
You
There's
had-
one more.
And we just sent you a report today about break-ins.
Oh, and break-ins. Okay, so many of us got a recent email from a citizen who was concerned about the number of car break-ins, and I wanted to know what the quantity of car break-ins are by district, and we cannot get that information either. And that is a function of the data system that we have in place currently. And our Director of IT has submitted a request, $250,000, which we approved at a prior City Council meeting, I believe. Is that right, Mr. City Manager? No, that's not right?
It was a quote for upgrading our current financial system was, and financial and land management system, and I think was.
Well, anyway,
Sam
just
clarified.
in general, I thought we approved it, though. The 250, we haven't approved that? Okay. We have a data problem, everybody, and because we can't measure what we have, we can't manage it. We don't know. It's incredibly concerning, and I am very worried that there is this, like a big, huge boil that is going to erupt eventually, and we're going to be caught completely off guard. When we all got the notice about how many missing people there are, that was staggering. I mean, I was blown away by that. And the next question is, well, who are these people? And in order to get that information, every single report has to be gone over by hand. Do you know what that's like to go over 500 reports, 800 reports? The number of, and I'll give you another example. Our assistant city manager told me that he cannot give me a list of all the businesses that get city assistance. It would be staggering. The word he used was enormous. It would be an enormous task. That is because our data systems are so antiquated. We don't know in detail what we're doing. And so, I completely understand Councilwoman Moore's concern that if you drive on the streets in the 1st District, you want to see progress, you want to see neat and tidy yards. But I am suspecting that the majority of those yards that are not neat and tidy are owned by a handful of landlords. But we don't know that. So, I would like to see us take very seriously our ability to collect the data, act on the data, make policy decisions on the data, and we cannot do that unless we put more money towards it. So, and I don't know what the correct request is at this point, because I don't know that anyone knows the number that it would take to upgrade our software systems. And maybe the city manager does know.
I do, and we do have a capital item in here to replace the one solution system, which is our land management system and our financial system as part of the budget. It's included. It's a $2.1 million replacement. And that would replace the financial system, the land management system that covers the community development department. It would include the ability for us to do billing on a property basis in the city, which is essential for the stormwater utility. So it's the underpinnings for most of our data that we have and use on a daily basis in the city. Where it's not going to help, and I'll let Sam talk about this to a certain extent, is within some of the systems that the police department runs, because that's a separate platform on the criminal side that they have when they're running their reports on that. But we do have money in this budget to replace that. Director Rivera, if you want to explain some of the data challenges we have.
May I ask a follow-up question, please? But it's not in this CIP?
It is.
So where is it? I'm just looking, maybe I don't have a complete CIP.
It's under ERP,
Do you know what page it's on?
software package. I don't know what page it is. Resource planning software, yes.
But,
It's page
Okay, so
18,
it's-
page 18 in the
page
capital.
18, okay. But it's not going to take care of the issues that I just discussed. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah,
It will
because,
take care of them.
yeah, remember when we talked, I asked another software company the question you wanted to know about the property, the landlords, the top 10 landlords, and their account rep told me that they would be taken care of. You'd be able to produce a list quickly with this new software.
Okay.
But with our old system is that the current company, which is called Superion, they've abandoned the community software and purchased another company. So that $250,000 was their quote to upgrade us to their current software. And my contention with that was that you gave us this, or we bought this software already. It's not our fault that you went out and abandoned it. You went to another company. You purchased another company. We shouldn't have to pay anything at all. So I've been in discussions with them, but it's not going very well. They're having some financial issues, I believe. They're losing people, and they have a lot of openings in their corporate offices. So it's something that we've looked at for a while about getting a piece of software that can talk across all departments, share data, and be able to produce the reports that you need and we need to do our jobs more effectively. So this new software, this ERP system, would do that. The old software company have lost 80-something government agencies over the last few years. And they're all going to this new software.
Okay, so I got the number wrong. So it's 2.1 million that we're going to need to spend in order to get ourselves up to speed to be able to measure what we want to manage.
Yes.
Completely across all platforms. You're not going to find city council members asking for information, and then we're going to say, oh, there's a void in that particular category or department. Because I think this issue that Councilwoman Moore brings up, 1,700 lots, I mean, that is tragic for a section of town that is already suffering from the other issues that happen when you have blighted properties. And part of the reason we can't address it is that we really, we think we know who the bad landlords are, but we don't have the data to show it.
Absolutely. And under our current system, you're absolutely right.
So in my opinion, that should escalate, that should surface to the top, the most important thing, so that we know that we've had 100 young women disappear, and they are under the age of 18, as an example.
You're talking about a different set of software. The software we're budgeting is for financials and community and utility billing. You're talking about public safety software.
I'm talking about all the software that the city uses to run its businesses. So we're not going to be able to get that number. Is that right?
You can, if the two systems talk to each other. But right now, we don't have anything that they're two separate, complete.
Okay, but with the $2.1 million, when we spend $2.1 million on this upgrade, will all the systems start talking together?
No. Not public safety and financials.
So that needs to be a council discussion, folks, because when you start peeling away the layer of this onion and you start asking questions and all you are asking for is data, and we come up with it's too much work, in 2017, unless I'm completely ignorant about this topic, and please tell me if I am, I think I'm going to use Councilwoman Moore's favorite word, it's unacceptable.
I agree, but we have to get a good set of a base software for our financials first before we can actually move on and have the two systems talking to each other. We can accommodate a change in the future between public safety and financials. We can do that. That's not a problem. but you have to get a good base system first before you spend money on two separate, completely separate systems talking to each
Well,
other.
and I really appreciate the work that you were doing, and I know that when you got here, you were faced with a totally antiquated system, and you've made tremendous headway. This is not a criticism of you or your department. This is my effort to bring awareness about this issue to, council members that may not be aware. Maybe you are, but I really do think it needs to be, a very high priority topic. And for those people that know more about the topic, I'd like to hear what you think. Any other council people have any? I'm really interested in hearing how important this is to other people.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I get on to what I pressed to speak about on this topic, I would agree that we have a system problem. I believe when you came in as director, you inherited this system. Is that correct? And what you were talking about replacing is the one solution system?
Yes.
And if, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't that system just come in on, was it 2012? Or when did that one solution system come in place? Do you know?
Yeah, it was before I got here, probably 2012, 2013, something like that.
And do we know how much it cost to implement the one solution?
It was actually a zero licensing cost to implement that system. We only paid for...
What we paid for?
Well, I mean, it was the same company that developed our old software, which was used all over the country and was done well.
Well, the reason I ask is because when I got elected, I rode around with some of our code enforcement folk, and they were complaining, and that was 2013, and they were complaining about how bad the system was in 2013. I'm glad we finally got to the place where we all now really acknowledge out loud that this system is so bad that we need to replace it. But I would agree with Councilwoman Akeson in that if we are not looking at some type of wholesale system replacement, when we know we are so deficient in so many areas, then yes, it's unacceptable that we are going to move forward with 2.1 on a system that is only part of it. If I read the project purpose, it says the purpose of this project is to purchase software to manage the city's stormwater utility. Now, it just talked about stormwater utility and the need for financial billing and permitting software in the narrative, but the essence of it was to manage the stormwater utility. And so we weren't even talking about any of the things that Councilwoman Akeson talked about, and so that's not even on the map right now. Is that correct?
No, it actually will do everything.
Do everything she suggests?
We're going to start with the stormwater utility. We're going to move on to financials. Then you have the human resources side, payroll side, and then you have community also, which includes code enforcement, building permits, and such.
So it's a phased-in approach is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
It will eventually get to what she's asking about, but it's the very first thing I understand. You need to find out where your money is and where you're moving the money around, so that's important. And so you're suggesting that it will eventually get to those issues that she's raising in this software that we're buying.
Well, Councilmember Akeson was talking about crime reports. And because of state law, we can't share that data like that. So they're not going to talk to each other completely. They're going to talk to each other in
Okay, I understand. So can we look at getting an additional, and we don't have to do it in this budget cycle. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking, is it possible for us to look at some type of software that when we're ready to integrate it, will talk to this system in some way that if it needs to? I know you can't cross-talk on some of the things you're suggesting. I get that completely. But it needs to be able to be incorporated so that folks who need to get the information and run the reports can do that. Is there a way that we can go back, and it doesn't have to be between now and November 7th, when we approve this budget, and look at bringing in a system and so that we can start talking about it, what it does, what it needs to do. I'm always good for wanting to plan something before you make a purchase. I think this is a good time to start asking folks, what is deficient about the system you're using, so when you do go out looking for it, you can look for the right thing. Is that something that you can do?
We have been doing that.
Okay, so you're ready to make a suggestion?
Yes.
Can you do it tonight?
Tyler Technologies would be the company I would go with.
We'll report on the things that Councilwoman Akeson is talking about.
When she was talking about the community side, yes, absolutely. Public safety. If you're talking public safety, you're talking an additional $6 to $7 million. The city of Madison, Wisconsin replaced their public safety system, their 911 and police reporting systems, and you're talking $6 to $7 million at that point.
Okay, so
That
I'm
still
going to end
doesn't
in this section of it by saying we need to do a better analysis of what we have, what we can tweak until we don't have $6 or $7 million. Okay, so we know that. Doesn't mean that we can't start getting at trying to get this information. We have to figure this out. We can't. Going back to the issue that I asked to speak about, we need to know who these landlords are. And yeah, it would be wonderful to put pressure on the landlords by not cutting them if it made a difference to them. Apparently, it doesn't make a difference to them because they're not cutting it. There's no pressure on those folks. They're not doing it anyway. It's putting pressure on the next door neighbor who's lived there for 30 or 40 years, whose house looks immaculate, even though it's older, and they take very much pride in their community, in their neighborhood. And unfortunately, in the South Side, you may have this kind of property on both sides of your house and across the street and behind you. And that's not acceptable. That's not something that I'm willing to allow our residents to endure. We wouldn't allow it in other parts of our community, and it shouldn't be allowed here either. And so I still would like to suggest that we appropriate the funds that are necessary to cut these private lots. And how about this as a concept? We have a legal department. Let's look at legally what we can do. If these folks, if you're going, Director Black, if you've got the same lots that you're cutting every year, 5 and 6 times, and you bill these folks and they throw the bill away and laugh at you, then shame on us if we're not using our legal system to go after them. I tell you, we've got people in the community that would gladly take on those houses, take the house from these people. If we should know who they are. We've got a rental registration program. When they roll up and you got that address on the list, it's like when you go through, most people have flown internationally. And when you come up there, you have to present your visa, and they run your name, and they can tell if you're on the no-fly list. And so when we have a rental registration program, that's our no-fly list. And if that address pops up as a chronic nuisance, no, they can't get registered. How about you pay us the $3,000 we paid to cut that lot of yours for the last 5 years before we'll let you to do that? And if they say no, then we take the property. Now, maybe that's extreme. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know we have a legal department that needs to know what we're talking about. We shouldn't be sitting here every year saying that, well, we cut this amount and, it's so much money and we don't get it back. Is it possible, Director Black, that we can take legal action? Is there some state thing that says that we can't take legal action? Do we know how to take legal action? Do we have a legal department?
Sorry, Councilwoman, we have had discussions with legal, and we obviously work with the legal department on all of these cases, whether it's tickets or work orders or demolition orders or housing cases. I believe that there probably are resources that we could bring to bear, and that's a conversation that we will continue to have with Corporation Counsel and his staff.
I don't want to continue to have a conversation. I've had a conversation for 4 years now, 4 years and 6 months, about the same issue. Conversation time is over. I would like to know, what is this, October 26th? I would like to know, before November 7th, what we are going to do legally for these folks who owe us money for what we've done. I would like to know before November the 7th, those individuals, if these are 1,700 and they're on the rental registration list and we're not doing anything about collecting money from them when they register, then shame on us. I want to know how many of those 1,700 or whatever the number is are on the rental registration. So if they're on the rental registration, we know very clearly who they are. And if we're not going after them, shame on us. And this is not just this. Anything else that we're allowing because we're nice guys for these people to skate, then shame on us. This is the last time I want to have a conversation about going after slum landlords. We've got a lot of great tenants. We got a lot of great landlords out there. And the few who are causing this problem is making it bad for everyone else who are not causing problems. And we should not allow that to continue to happen. You know, these folks ask us, why are they paying this rental registration money? So what are we doing with this money when we collect it, they ask? You know, and they've got these, and we went up on the rental registration, and if you got more units, you pay more money. So what are you doing with the money? We can at least say to them, hey, we're going after these deadbeats that are causing you to have to pay more money. And so before November the 7th, I'd like to have some actionable thing in place or planned, and add that to your, February or March, where you have the rental registration meetings, that this becomes a high priority that is talked about. What are you going to do? Because these guys, you know, they come in their registration and they pay the little money and they laugh at you because you're not doing anything. Yeah, I don't pay that ticket. They just keep cutting it and I won't pay it. You hear them talking about it. So let's put some teeth behind it. Director Black.
Mr. Manager, can we have something back in a couple weeks on that?
We certainly can.
Thank you.
We will.
I have Councilman Montalongo next.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd just like to add on to that, and I admire Councilwoman's passion for her district and all the work that she's been doing. And earlier this year, we put some more budget money in to request so that we could remediate some of these properties. One of the things that I asked for was a report back on what that balance is that's owed to the city, which I have not received. And I've had plenty of time to think about this as well. But besides that, we need to know, as you're putting the information together, City Manager, what are those additional costs in legal fees and people and resources that it's going to take to try and recoup our money, and I think that's where we get stuck at. There's a lot more that we have to put into it, and it's kind of like a sinking ship that I feel at times that we're jumping on here. So I guess my request is, what is the total cost that it takes to try and recoup that money, and what is that balance that's owed to the city on our balance sheet somewhere?
I think that, those three items that we discussed at the beginning of the meeting that were original requests from several meetings ago, and if there's more things in CIP that council would like to look at, the time it's now, or it's next Tuesday at the latest. So if you have questions about it, or if you want some more information, ask tonight so we can do that. But with a November 7th target date for this, need to bring those to the manager's attention. So do we have anything else right now at this time that any council member wants to move on in CIP? And if not, we'll move over to the next part of the slide presentation. Councilman, is that on CIP or is that on what we've already done? Okay, Councilman's here.
Just a quick correction, Mr. Mayor, on the first vote for the Dries Lane project. Just realized after talking to City Clerk that my vote was registered incorrectly. Should have been a yes. My vote was a yes on that.
And I did talk to the clerk, and I don't think we have to do a reconsideration and a revote on that. We can just change that as it's not final action. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Councilwoman Jensen?
Which vote was that?
For me? I can't.
Oh, which vote was that on?
His vote on the Dries Lane was supposed to be a yes, and he registered as a no, so now it's unanimous. Okay, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ed, I just wanted to, in the next portion of the presentation, was to just simply walk through the revenue recommendations that are included as part of the budget and make sure that, hopefully our computer didn't go to sleep. Yeah, he did. He tried to clap on. Let's see if that would work. In the budget, we have four major revenue recommendations that are included. The first being the stormwater utility fee. It would be a $4.67 million increase in 2018, and then an $8 million increase in 2019. There is also included is the garbage fee increase of $3 million, which would generate $1.5 million in 2018, and then a $1 increase in 2019. That would generate about $500,000 in 2019. There is the recommendations on the special event fees at $200 per officer or the actual cost, and then the $100 per intersection. That would generate $120,000 annually. And then we made recommendations to increase the false alarm fines and then establish a permit charge for holders of alarm systems at $25, whether you're a business or a residence, and then a $500 alarm company permit that would be required to get annually. That would generate $100,000 for us. We will have, for those changes, we'll have ordinances that will be prepared for those for first reading on the 31st. But if there's any discussion of those specific items, if the direction of council is to take those out, that the budget doesn't balance, and those would be, then we'd have to start to look at how we make up that revenue difference if these items are not included in the budget. So.
Okay. So you just want to go in order on these,
Sure.
Mr. Manager?
If there's any, I guess maybe if there's any questions on the stormwater utility fee first, we certainly talk about that.
Maybe as a refresher from when we discussed this a couple weeks ago, you might want to remind everybody what the anticipated fee is, how it will be implemented, and so on.
Maybe I'll defer the unit charge discussion of how it's going to be calculated to our Director of Public Works and let him discuss that with you.
Thank you. We included on the report back, it was report back number 5, and it would have been page 21 of the report back. Yeah, budget report back, group 5, page 21. And on there is a breakdown of how that stormwater utility fee will be charged to each property owner. And basically, we've landed on a unit of 1,000 square feet of impermeable area is 1 billing unit. And for every billing unit, it would be $3. So for every 1,000 square feet of impervious area on your property, it's $3, with the average home in Peoria having 2,600 square feet of impervious area between the roof of their house and the driveway, which equates out to about an average bill of $8 a month per household. It would average out to about $8 a month per household.
Councilman Regenbach?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As much as this revenue discussion is never easy, I think this council has really shown its fortitude when 2 years ago we made the tough decision to address our road problem head-on and we made the commitment to raise the revenue to take care of that. I think we've been very transparent in how that has worked. Again, Director Reese, thank you so much for having on the website the revenue sources and the expenditures for those road projects. And I think we can all be very proud of the way that has worked. I see the stormwater as one of those things that we're in desperate need of, and it's not an easy vote, but I think it's a necessary vote. If we have 400 projects totaling $17 million, I think we owe it to our citizens to, again, face this head on and move forward with the stormwater utility. I just want to remind everybody listening, if anybody's listening out there tonight, that the One Water Committee that we put together a number of years ago held public meetings. We had a broad cross-section of people involved in that process, and this was their recommendation to address a $17 million backlog of projects. I think this is really going to be a step in the right direction, and I would just challenge the Public Works Department to be as transparent with this as they have been with the road expenditures. Clearly, the revenue source will be easy, one piece of pie, but to exhibit to the constituents and our taxpaying body of citizens where this money's going. And I think the list you provided of the 2017 projects just exemplifies the magnitude of the problem. So as I would say that by approving this, we're going to continue in that tradition of truth in budgeting, as I like to call it when I'm out in the neighborhoods, that this is a fee, we're all going to pay it. Nobody wants to do it, but this is where the money's going to be going. So I think we're on the right track here.
Did you want to make
motion?
that? Sure.
I'm happy
Just
to make
keep
them.
the discussion going. We have a motion to approve, seconded by Councilman Turner. Okay, further discussion on this item. Councilman Montalongo?
Thank you, Mayor. Director, I heard Councilman Riggenbach mention a list of projects. We talked about it in our last meeting. You said 400 projects, and I had requested that list. Is that list in here somewhere?
Yes, that is pages 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21, or 20 of the budget report back number 5. Broke down into different groups. We call the ARC projects as our annual repair contracts. And so those are some of the bigger projects. That would be sinkholes in people's backyards from storm sewer systems that drain the streets, outfalls that are deteriorating, or erosion problems that we're made aware of, and we rate those off of. We've been budgeting about $600,000 a year to address those, and we've been doing those off a priority listing that we have off severity and then dollars available. And so we work those down, and those total about, there's 55 of those projects, and they total about $12 million. And then we've started televising our storm sewer, very similar to what we were doing with the roads. Our goal with televising is that we can find defects in our storm sewer system and do a point repair or line them so that it costs us $10,000 for a repair versus $100,000 once a sinkhole, or $1 million once a sinkhole develops. And so we identified about $150,000 worth of repairs there, and I think there was a total of 19 projects on that one. And then page 17, part of our MS4 permit, which we have to manage our stormwater system, we have to go through and monitor the outfalls each year. and then notate what needs corrected or what not. And on average, any repair we do there is around $30,000. And we identified a number of projects each year, with 9 in 2012, 39 in 2013, 10 and 14, and so on, up to 24 the next year, and then 17 and 15. And then the final sheet, which is 18, 19, and 20. One thing we've been really trying to do in Public Works over the last 5 years is try to switch from being reactive to complaints to proactive. And so we've really been going out and monitoring systems and trying to repair problems before a citizen has a chance to notify us that it's a problem. And this is our list that we've been working off of, trying to whittle those down that our operations folks have identified that need to be addressed. And I think there were 139 inlet repairs that were identified. We have 10 ditch cleaning, or 46 ditch cleaning areas that we would need to address. And if you add up all between those 5 pages, that I think it's like 436 projects, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions on the stormwater utility? Councilwoman Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a follow-up, on those pages, Director Reese, I think 18 through 20, I'm looking at them right now. I know you have the addresses listed, although it's not broken down by council district. Are they pretty equally distributed throughout the city, or is it focused in one specific area?
We could provide that. We have them all mapped. It was just with the city being so big, it kind of looked as one big point. But we can provide that detail back. But when we look at it, actually the majority of these requests or projects are in districts 3, 4, and 5. There's a small amount in District 2, hardly any in District 1, and that has a lot to do with the combined system. We don't see the erosion and storm sewer issues in Districts 1, Partial 2, and Partial 3 because it's all tied into the combined system. We see more of those issues in Districts 4 and 5.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm entertaining, we have a motion, second, and if there's no more questions, I'll ask you to cast your ballots. It's to approve the utility as outlined. The motion passes with 9 ayes, 1 nay. Voting no, Councilmember Montalongo. Okay. Mr. Manager.
The second revenue item that was built into the budget was the $3 increase in the garbage fee on a monthly basis. As we've mentioned to you, the garbage fund owes the general fund a little over $4 million. By doing this will actually reduce that deficit, and it will actually improve the cash position of the general fund as well. And it will bring that charge back in line with the actual cost of providing that service as well.
Councilmember Euler.
One of the things that I think that is most important as we get into these budgets, and especially as the times get more challenging, is to ensure that costs are allocated appropriately and that we are making sure that we aren't running deficits in accounts to shore them up other places. So I would make the motion that we approve this one.
Motion to approve. Is there a second? Seconded, Councilman Regenbach. Further discussion, Councilwoman Moore.
Well, it won't be any surprise for anyone to hear what I have to say about the garbage fee. Now, first let me say I will vote in favor of increasing it because I think it's needed. However, as I said in the past, and I'm going to say today and I'm going to say the next time it comes up, that when we're charging a garbage fee for property that has nobody living there, I don't think that's fair. I'm remembering one property in the North Valley, I believe it's on Madison, and the neighbors tell me that the elderly couple, one passed and then the other passed, and then the family, they're not ready to sell the house, so it's closed up. They did a very good job of boarding it up themselves. It looks really nice. But there's no one living there, has been no one living there for years. Yet every month they get a soon to be $15, no, what is it, $17? It'll be $17. Soon to be a $17 monthly bill for trash, and no trash has been picked up from that property in years. Now, because of our inefficient system, technology system, or the garbage technology system, whoever, and the GP system that pick up the trash, we can't seem to figure out how to look at a house and say, oh, that's vacant, it's boarded up, no one's going to be there, there won't be a trash can there. We can't figure that out. So first, I have a fifth grader who's 10-year-old. I think I can send him down the street and have him write down the addresses of the properties that are boarded up. I think I can do that pretty good. The U.S. Postal Service has figured out that if a house is not tenanted and there's no mail coming to that house, they put this little green flag on the mailbox. They have figured out how to do it. But somehow this city cannot figure out how to not bill people for a house that has no trash being picked up from there. Now, yes, some would say, well, if Denise, you took those out, then this whole thing that we're doing, maybe instead of charging $17, we'd have to charge $25. We talk about charging for actual expenses. Well, I contend there is no actual expense to not pick up trash from a vacant house that has no can, that you're not adding additional garbage into the dump where we take the trash, so there's no additional cost there. So I would like for someone, and I'm being rhetorical, to tell me where the additional cost is to not pick up at a house that's vacant. Now, some would say, well, the cost to figure out that it's not vacant. Post offices figure that out for you in most cases. I have a fifth grader who could use money in the summer. He could walk down and take down the addresses of property that's vacant. Or we've got kids in the summer. It can be a summer project. And that, maybe once a quarter, it's a summer project or a quarterly project that a lot of these folks who are unemployed would love to $10 or $15, $20 an hour or whatever it would be to verify what we can't seem to verify. So I will vote for it. I don't like the fact that we continue to subject folks who have property that is vacant, easily determined is vacant, has no utility running to it is vacant. Talk to the utility company, they can tell you. But we can't seem to figure that out. So I'll bring it up again the next time we talk trash. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Manager.
In a lot of reasons, for the reasons that Councilwoman Moore has just outlined, we moved away from monthly billing and have now put the garbage billing on the property tax bill. So it is a separate line on the property tax bill. Every property owner has to pay property taxes, and so it was done. We've seen our collections rate have gone up by doing that. And the only other, to just address Councilwoman Moore's other point, is that 70% of the cost of this service is the cost of labor and the cost of the vehicles driving around every street, every alley in the city picking up trash. So it's the disposal cost for garbage is only 30% of the total contract cost.
Councilmember Regenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to piggyback on Councilman Euler's remarks about the cost of the fee reflecting the cost of the service, and I think that's really important. Mr. Manager, you've heard me harp on this in years past, and I would just encourage you and the Finance Department and Public Works as we'll be having a new contract with our solid waste disposal company, whoever that may be in the future, but I really think it's important that the garbage fee reflects the actual cost so that we don't get into the point again where we're borrowing money from the general fund to prop this up. It can be very clear and very concise to explain to people why that cost is what it is, and it just muddies the water when we start subsidizing it with other sources. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Councilwoman Jensen?
I guess just to follow up on that question, I mean, what do we do if, or how confident are you in your projections that this is going to cover the fee, since the last time the council increased the fee, it didn't cover the expenses?
At our current rates, and knowing what we're spending, I think we've anticipated that our expense for 2018 for trash collection is going to be $6.9 million, just under $7 million. And this would increase revenues to $8.1 million. That would allow us to then drop that down into the bottom line, to try and fill that deficit that we have in the refuse collection fund. So it was designed with the intent of trying to, at least in this first year, fill up that hole that we have and improve the city's cash position. And then eventually that's going to creep. We know that at least with the landfill costs, those are going to grow 5% a year until landfill 2 is filled up and we start operating landfill number 3. So, and then we should have a good handle here in the early part of November, on what the cost of collection is going to be from the bids that we get back. So, and we have some significant interest in that as well.
So I guess as a follow-up, I mean, wouldn't it make sense for us to wait until we get the bids back?
You have to pass a budget, and we need to move forward with this. If the bids come back and that dollar amount's higher, we'll have to come back to you and say the actual cost is higher. But we don't think that it's going to be materially higher than where we're at today currently, or at that $17 figure.
And when are the bids supposed to come back?
Oh, so, but the proposals are coming back.
Hear that?
Our current garbage contract runs through June of 2019. So our numbers are solid for 2018 and for 6 months of 2019.
Okay.
That's when the transition would take place.
And when are those bids scheduled to come back?
November 3rd.
So there is time if we wanted to defer it until the bids came back.
No, we won't. That's right. I mean, staff will not have had the opportunity to meet with the vendors and review that and come back. The bids come in November 3rd. It's going to take us probably another month to 6 weeks to be able to give you a recommendation based upon meeting with whoever has bid and looking what those numbers are. So.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else on this item? Okay, I'm seeing no lights. We have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Manager?
The third item, and I know we've had a lot of discussion, and we tried to put together some information in the report backs for you, is on the special event fees. We have recommended in the budget and would recommend an adoption of an ordinance at $200 per officer that is hired, or the actual cost. If it's not going to reach that $200 figure, that we would bill the actual cost. And then where Public Works was involved in closing an intersection, it would be $100 per intersection. Our estimates are that would generate about $120,000 annually of the total amount that we have been expending over the years for special events. And that doesn't include those major events, the Red, White, and Boom and the IHSA. We took those out in the analysis that we gave you in the previous report back.
Councilwoman Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure everyone understands that this is not any attempt to decrease the number of activities that we have that come through our city, because it adds value, I believe, and part of, I think, the cost is offset by what may, in some cases, be a lot of guests coming to our town that are spending money. But my question, and I want to make a motion to approve and then come back with a comment first.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Councilmember Turner, thank you. Councilman Moore.
I was trying to find the report back where it indicated that we didn't have any idea how many intersections that we shut down, if you recall correctly. And so if we didn't have any idea how many intersections we shut down, how do we, or what confidence do we have in this $120,000 annual number?
We can identify how many intersections. We just don't have our rates aren't tied to intersections, because we pay our guys hourly and they go out and put out barricades for however many intersections. So we could come back and tell you specifically per each event how many intersections that would be.
Oh, so we can figure out how many intersections?
Yes.
For the past year, for example? Okay. And can you, once you do that, put a chart that shows this intersection was closed 15 times, where this intersection was only closed 1 time? And then plot those on a graph and see how many coming through the, you know where I'm going?
Yes.
First district? Yeah. I don't necessarily need it as a report back for this process. I just think that would be good information to have. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have Councilmember Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My, Mr. Manager, my recollection, and when we start speaking or talking about this special event, Councilman Akeson was talking about a $5 million in overtime, and $120,000 is a long way from $5 million. Are we looking at, my understanding was we were trying to close the gap on the $5 million. Are we looking at other things to close that gap? Or is that all the best we can do right now is $120,000?
Well, what we were looking at here was looking at the special event fees, where we have people that are either working on their regular duty or are working in an off-duty capacity that are coming back on overtime to work this, and just looking at that as this portion of cost recovery. There's a certain amount of overtime that's just naturally going to be generated. I think the police chief currently has, is it 13 vacancies in the force right now? 14. There's 14 vacancies currently in the force. So to staff at a certain level, there's going to be people that are going to be working on overtime to fill the slots that are needed in patrol. That's going to happen during the course of the year until those positions.
I understand that now. So the $120,000, since we're talking about the garbage fee also, is that the current cost? Then the $120,000 would cover 100% of these fees then?
No, I think that we were still going to be $137,000 short on the PD side, and I think as we look at that on the public works side, the total cost that we've been incurring for these events, Director, do you remember in that report back? The 410 was the report back that talked about how could we close the gap between the actual cost and the charge that we were, or the fee that we were recommending. The total special event cost was in the first series of report backs.
Mr. Manager, it's not that important you look right now, but it's just to piggyback on Councilwoman Moore's point. Shouldn't we recuperate or 100% of those costs, number one? Number two, if we don't, if we would we get hurt business-wise?
Well, I think with some of these special events, you might. I mean, you might see that the cost of providing the police protection for these special events, it might drive some of those to look at other communities to possibly hold those events or to rethink whether or not they can go forward with it. Some of the smaller ones where they're 5K runs that might close down a couple of streets and might have one or two officers involved, if we can encourage them to use the riverfront where we have a trail that doesn't require any streets to be closed, that's the direction that we could push that in. You know, we could certainly look at working with the park district to try and encourage them to use park district facilities as well, so that they're not blocking city streets and blocking traffic. We've got some great park facilities in this community as well. And so I think there are things that we can do that way for those types of special events. But we're always going to have, in a city that's trying to be vibrant, you're always going to have some special events where you're going to close the street down, whether that would be, the Mardi Gras and May events that go on the riverfront. We shut down Water Street, where you're going to have a requirement of trying to get out and close those streets down and incur some costs with it. So the question becomes, how much of that is the council comfortable with eating?
Well, I'd like to recommend you study what you just said. I mean, my point was with the Rock Island Trail and the Riverfront Trail and all these trails we have, if we can push all these events where we wouldn't have all these costs, I think we can make that. I mean, it's a business decision for us. I think you should, the staff should really consider moving most of these things where the cost would be nothing or a lot less. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, we've got $200 per officer or actual cost. Is the $200 our minimum floor, or is that our ceiling?
That was the ceiling, not the floor. We did not look at that as a floor. We looked at saying $200. Because we have some events where if it's a 5K and it might be 2 hours worth of time, that's not going to cover that. But then you may have an event that's 6 hours long, and that may not then reach the full cost recovery at that point.
Who determines the number of officers that an event will need?
The police department does.
And then on the $120,000 annually, I think, and we may not know this until the future, but are we anticipating that some events might move and so that revenue stream is pulled from there? So is that $120,000 based on last year or historical data?
Really based on the historical data of what we've seen in the past. So if some move, that number may not be as large because we're able to do what Councilman Sear wants and shift them into other places where we don't have that expense.
Right. Okay, so it takes it off both sides, really. Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Regenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, if some of these 5Ks would move to the riverfront where there wouldn't need to be the police or public works involvement, would there still be a fee assessed to the organization?
No. What we're talking about is where we're incurring cost. This fee would be established to try and recover some of those costs. So if there's no staff time for us to put them on the riverfront, on the trail, we would not incur any cost.
All right.
Mr. Scroggins.
There still would be an event fee charged of the $120 or $75.
Okay.
So we need to know that the event is going on, so we can plan appropriately as well. Just because they may not be subject to the police or the closing of the intersection fee, but they still would be subject to getting an event fee.
I think this is a good step for us because clearly there's so many, as you look at this, and so many honest to goodness fundraisers that this is going to be a shock to them. But I do think that between Glen Oak Park and some of the other facilities, the riverfront trails, that it might not be their first choice, but it would be a way to still hold these events in the city and get the community involved in the fundraising event. I also think that there's probably going to be some more look to our business community for corporate sponsorships and some of these things that haven't had that in the past, because the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, I'm not sure if they had that this year, but I know we had the PNC Peoria Marathon last year. So our corporate community might be challenged to step up to the plate for some of this as well. But I really think this is important, again, in that truth in budgeting, that everybody's aware of what the costs of these things are. So thank you for this, and I'll be supporting this as well.
Thank you. Councilwoman Moore?
Thank you. I forgot to mention, Director Reese, I would like for the 2018 season, walk, run, trot season, for there to be at least one clear intersection coming out of the south side of Peoria at all times. If you look at the number of events that are listed here, there are 67. There are actually more than 67 events that occur, but only the ones that utilize public works or firefighters, or police officers are listed here. And I'm remembering one event that a fraternity puts on every year. It's a walk for their scholarship fund that is not listed in this report because they don't shut anything down. So if we assume that of this list of 67, if you count, there are at least 30, there are actually more than 30, but there are at least 30 walk, run, trots, and easily 20 of those are coming through the first district every Sunday. So if you assume that there are 20 weekends in the summer and you've got 20 events, then I'm getting calls every Sunday morning when somebody can't get to church. When somebody can't get, I remember someone couldn't get to work. They couldn't figure out how to get out of the district. I was on my way to church, and 3 times I had to get turned around, and I asked, where can I get out? And I finally figured out I just had to wait, and I got to church. I was late, but better late than never, right? But I would like to see at least one clear thoroughfare out of the south side. Either it's up MacArthur Highway, University. I know coming around Knoxville is not an option, but we need to get out. And I think it's unfair for folks every single weekend during their summer that they're locked into the community and they can't get out to go to work, to go to school, to go to church, whatever. If you could put that on your agenda, I would greatly appreciate it. And the other thing I'd like to see happen is a listing prepared so that when someone comes to these intersections, someone can say, here's some clear through, because that's not happening. We talked about this last year, and that's not happening. We can emphasize, somebody mentioned moving into trails and things. If we make sure that we're looking at the manager's suggestions, we talked about volunteers. If they have more volunteers that can man some of these intersections, then the cost is reduced as well. But my main point was getting that cleared through so that folks can get out. The same section, the same path every time. Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? Okay, I'm seeing no lights. We have a motion and a second to approve this recommendation. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Manager?
The last item that's built into the revenue item that's built into the budget was looking at our false alarm fees and fines and the permits that we would recommend imposing for owners of alarm systems. We spend a lot of time, police and fire, responding to alarms. Some of them are false alarms. We also have, I think, 40 companies that put in alarms throughout the city. So we've recommended, as part of the budget, a $25 permit for all alarm holders So that would be a business or a residence. And then a $500 alarm permit for the installers. So each company that does this would have an annual fee of $500 to do the installation work, to be able to perform the installation work inside the city of Peoria. And then increasing the fines for false alarms to generate some additional revenue for the amount of time that we end up responding to false alarm fines. And this would still leave right now, the first three are free, and this would still leave that at that level. We're not looking at changing the penalties on, or the way that we've structured it. It would just increase the fine. That's all.
Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on this permit fee, how would we, I guess, manage that? How do we know when somebody put in an alarm? How do we get notified? How does our system, and understanding that we probably have an antiquated sort of data system as we go?
Well, we've actually replaced the alarm system, and now it does require us to put a permit number within the system itself. So as somebody is installing the systems, they have to let us know the address that they're putting it in. The installers do, and so I think this portion of the ADSI system is actually giving us good information in terms of the numbers of what we have. So.
Don't hold that against the earlier comments that maybe we have some work to do on the system.
We
had
have some
one
more
area,
to do
but-
in other areas.
Yeah, we
that's
may
for
still have
sure.
some other work to do there. My other question is, I guess my concern is, by putting a $25 fee on this that's annual, if we start having people turn their systems off or disconnecting their systems on a system that is an asset to both our police and fire department, because if the fire alarms are tied into it, it can give a quicker response to be able to call for help. Same way on the police department. And I understand that we have some false alarms in there. And including the businesses, there's an ability to get an officer or a police or firefighter quicker there because of the notification. So I guess my concern is by putting a $25 permit fee, will we start to push people away from what really is a piece of security for them? So just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Maybe just make sure I'm clear on it, the companies that install these for residences have to somehow
They would be required to come get a
if
permit.
If somebody buys a system at Radio Shack or wherever and installs their own, do they have to? Do we know about that too? Because I'm telling you, there's a ton of those out there too, and you guys are getting a lot of calls from those systems too. So I don't know how we close that gap, or how we. And I'm just saying hypothetically, a company puts the system in and tells the person they have to call themselves and say it's coming in, maybe to avoid it. I think we need to make sure that if this passes, I don't know if it will, but we have to make sure we close that gap too. Okay. I had Councilman Sear was next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick questions. Number one, you mentioned something about, can you define for me what's a lot of money is? You said we spend or waste a lot of money. Can you define that for me, please? And the second question is who decided? Second question: who decided on these amounts of money?
So the first question is in terms of the number of alarms that we have. We have hundreds of alarms that go off every year that we end up responding to. The fire department will go out, or the police department will be sent out on an alarm call. Some they're valid, others are false. The way the system is designed, if it's false, the first 3 false alarms we don't charge you for. After that, from 4 on up, you get a charge for that because of the cost of and the time of our first responders going out to that. So can we quantify that number? We could probably take a look at how much time we respond on each one of those calls and then come up with a dollar amount based upon the number of people that are responding. And if that's something you'd like that information, we can pull that for you. The dollar amounts in terms of looking at this, Martha Hammer from the police department, who manages this system, looked over what other communities were doing, what their rates were, and had made some recommendations about about the permit fee and about the fee for the alarm companies, and then what we might be able to see as far as raising the fine amount for these calls. And so, working with some of her recommendations, I made the recommendation that we come up with these numbers here. So that's how we came to the numbers.
Thank you, sir. We're surely not going to balance our budget on these fines, but why 2, 3, or versus 4 free alarm, false alarm?
I think it's been our standing policy in looking at what other communities do. Usually, it seems like that's a pretty common practice. Is it?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next, I had Councilwoman Akison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How many false alarms do we get? Do you know?
Let me see if I can find that. I thought I brought it with me.
I mean, just, do you have a ballpark number?
I'm gonna look to maybe Chief Mitchell if I don't know, Chief, if you have the numbers from Martha, but like I said, there's hundreds a year that we're going on.
Okay, so because I've got a question. This just recently happened to me, and I happened to be home, and I had workmen doing plaster work, and their plaster dust caused my smoke detector to go off. And of course, we heard the sirens and everything, and I quickly called the security company. And I said, there's nothing wrong. Please, cancel it. Oh, well, we've already called the fire department. That will be up to them as to whether they respond or not. And I said, well, tell them not to respond. There's no reason to respond. And they came anyway. So can we do more to address those, I thought that was, I really did think that was a waste of effort after, there must have been 10 people at my house that day, and and they came with axe in hand and dutifully doing their job, but it was unnecessary. And and I think I've talked to you about this, and it sounds like that happens more often than not.
So I was able to find the numbers. There's about 3,400 alarms a year that go off. So it's about 300 a month. So is what we're looking at.
False alarms.
Not false total alarms, valid or false.
Well, you absolutely want public safety people to respond to the alarms and take them seriously. That's not what I'm saying, but I think they need to be given permission if the homeowner calls and says it's not necessary. They need to be given permission to say, okay. If there's a way to legitimately do that without it being, the bad guy in the house saying everything's fine, don't bother to come.
No, I mean, I think that's a question of deployment that we can certainly have that conversation with the police chief and the fire chief.
I appreciate it very much because, they have come to my house before when we really did have a fire, and I really appreciated them showing up.
Okay. I had Councilwoman Moore next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that you had the first 3 free. You didn't have to pay for that false alarm. I understand the increased fines for false alarms. I get that. Appreciate the first 3 free. I'm trying to understand, maybe you can help me understand the purpose of the permit, $25 permit for the business or household, or the $500 permit for the privilege of having an alarm system. I'm not sure what the permit fee, what is that going to go toward? I mean, some may see that as a money grab.
Well, we're not alone in making a recommendation to you that there be a permit fee in place for having these.
I'm not saying we're not alone. I get that. I get that completely. But we talked a long time about collecting garbage fees for the service, for what it cost. And so with this, I'm just trying to figure out what that permit fee is going to pay for.
Well, the permit fee pays for, it's basically saying that you are authorized to have your system tied into the police department so that if your alarm goes off, that the police or the fire department show up at your door in a very timely manner.
Well, as the mayor indicated, you can buy that from not Radio Shack, but Best Buy or someplace where you don't have to tell anybody and it's tied in, and they will then further say, I pay taxes for the fire company, for the fire department and the police department to come to my house.
And if the alarm goes off and we respond, we can also then find that address and then start to say, oh, by the way, you need to register your alarm system and go after that. I mean, I think that looking at this was a revenue discussion. So we were looking at, is this one potential revenue avenue that you could look at raising some additional revenues to fund the operations of the city? And the alarm system that we have, we probably don't, and we can calculate, and we'll be happy to do it. It's not covering the cost of sending a fire engine or a police officer to that home for the amount of time that they're spending on that call. False or valid. It's not doing that.
So then I can say to folks that permit fee is helping to defray some of the costs of the fire department or the police department.
Yes.
That's what I needed. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilwoman Jensen.
I know that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify, so the permit fee will it be just a fee moving forward for people that put in a new system, or it'll be everybody that has one now?
It would be for everyone that has one now, and it would be an annual $25 permit.
Okay. And how will that be collected if they don't pay it?
It will work through that process with, right now we have a billing system through finance, and we'll continue to work to track down and make sure that everybody has a valid permit.
Okay. And then it's going to be the same fee for residents and businesses?
Correct.
And what's the rationale there? Just because it's the same cost?
Our rationale was that it really is the same cost. I think that there's more for the installers. That's why we looked at a higher fee on the installer side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I had Councilman Euler next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification. These are bills going directly to the homeowner and not through the alarm company, the $25. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I had Councilmember Ruckriegel next.
Just two final questions that I thought of once. The FOIAbility of these permits, is that an issue? Because if I have FOIA who has a permit on this along, I don't know, a certain street, a certain neighborhood, do I now know who has an alarm and who doesn't?
The residential address would be considered private information that couldn't be disclosed. So although some information on the permit could have to be disclosed, FOIA would exempt the residential address.
Okay. And then on collections of these fees, with our systems that we currently have in place, are our collections going to be any different as proposed than what our unmowed lawns are? Because it seems like we have a problem collecting those fees. So if this is going to be the same system, would we not have the same sort of similar problems?
I'll turn to Director Scroggins, who manages the financial end of this operation.
We don't have the problem billing the individuals. We have the problem collecting from the individuals. So establishing the bill and mailing the bill is not an issue. Like I said, when we come back with orders, we'll have to put some teeth in the collectability of if they don't pay, what do we do? So now what we do is if they don't pay on the Whedon letter, then we send them to legal, and many times they file a lien on the property, but if they don't sell the property and they're not going to pay the lien off, that we run into.
So again, we're kind of in the round robin of we can send out a lot of bills. We got that part correct. It's just the collection side may not be as easy for us on this either.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Okay. I have Councilman Euler.
Thank you. One more question. Will the bill be going to the landlord or the property owner?
I believe it would be going to the property owner.
I apologize, the tenant or the property owner?
I still think it would, and we'll have to check on it. I think it's the property owner that we would be sending it to.
So there are going to be tenants all over town putting alarm systems in, and the property owner knows nothing about it, and we have no way to manage that.
That's something we could certainly look at how we're structuring that, but, we'll take a look at that and give you a report back on that.
I mean, this would be probably a bigger issue even for commercial when you get into tenants and putting in alarm systems, and then suddenly the owner of the building starts getting all of these permit bills.
Got it?
Okay, good point. I have Councilmember Sear next.
Mr. Mayor, do we have a motion?
We do not.
For this? We do not? Can I make a motion?
You can.
I would move to accept this item after removing the $25 permit. The rest would be okay, the $500 alarm. The rest of it, it's okay, except I would remove the $25 permit.
Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Councilmember Montalongo. Thank you. Would there be further discussion on this one? Councilwoman Akison?
Okay, so I get this, so I'm clear. We're removing the $25 permit? Oh, I can't support that. Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Moore.
I think it probably would be the tenant because the landlord has no idea, and that the payment of the bill for the alarm companies goes to the tenant, not to the landlord.
We'll confirm that.
Yeah. If I could ask a council member, removing the 25, that's out of left field. I didn't hear any discussion about that not being there. Can you help me with that?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe that we put enough thoughts in that $25, especially after Councilman Euler's question about who would pay. If a tenant, I can see multiple discussion between tenants and landlord and owners who would pay for it. And I'd just like to put some more thoughts into this and have more discussion later about this $25.
Okay. So would it be helpful knowing that this is not going to go into effect until the first of the year at the earliest, and between now and then that clarity is provided that, okay, maybe it's provided to your satisfaction? Does that make any difference?
Well,
If perhaps we not vote on it tonight, but maybe the next time it comes, we get that clarity. I just don't want to have to revisit it if you get the clarity and you're okay with that.
Well, possibly, but I'm also concerned about how many small businesses we have that are selling alarm system. And how many of them are local, and maybe some tenants or landlord would decide to go buy their products outside the city limits. I'd just like to get some more thoughts on that, get a little more clarity how it would all work.
You're required to get a permit when you come in to register a new alarm system. So if you're a business that is outside of the city of Peoria, you would still have to pay the $500 fee because you're putting in systems inside the city of Peoria, because you'd have to come to us to get a permit while you're doing it. So we would be able to capture that revenue. I do believe that it would be the tenant, not the landlord, that would have to do. So because what's required is you have to get the permit at the address. You're taking out the permit in your name, whoever that is, whether that's the landlord or the tenant, and then they would have to then get that permit from us. That's kind of how the system itself works. So if you have a commercial property and you're in a strip mall, it would come to you as the business that's at that address. And it would be the same way if it were a tenant that had that, or a landlord if the landlord decided he wanted to have a alarm system on his property. So.
With the $25, I think that the city does. It's not a service that the city provides, correct? I mean, it's small business. It's a transaction between the business owner and a small business who sells these systems. So,
well, but the service we provide is when we show up at your door when the alarm goes off.
that's why you get the $500 and all the other fines, not the 20. I just feel it's another. We call it a fee. It's another tax on people that want to make a decision whether they want a system or not.
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Moore, were you finished? Okay, thank you. I have Councilmember Riggenbach next.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, I know this just came up in the last 5 minutes, but do you have any idea how much of that $100,000 annual projected revenue was based on the alarm company aspect and on how much was spent anticipated from the permit fee? If you don't, that's fine, because like I say, I know this.
As I'm looking at, there's about 2,000 residences that have alarm systems that are permitted through us, and 1,000 businesses. So it's about 3,000. So that might be, $75,000 right there. There's 3,000 permit holders currently that we have, and so that would be about $75,000.
So it's a pretty insignificant, well, nothing's insignificant in these budget discussions, of course, but it really knocks the wind out of the sails of this source. I would, based on your previous comments, you've clearly looked at what other cities have done in this regard. I wouldn't mind getting a little more clarity, as Councilman Sears said, but I would hate to knock this off the discussion tonight. So by voting to include these tonight doesn't mean we're going to enact them, but it would allow us to keep that as an option. So if Councilman Sears' motion passes, then it's knocked out of the discussion. But if it would fail, could we entertain a motion to include it, Mr. Mayor, or would it automatically be included?
The ones that pass are going to come back next week for official approval with an ordinance. So, which doesn't mean if it failed tonight, we couldn't make a motion to put it back in. But that would be, we have two more meetings if we're going to keep on the calendar. So
if the existing motion would fail, it would automatically stay in, wouldn't it?
No, if the motion, it's not in. Yeah, if the motion fails, it's not in.
Okay.
And frankly, we can put a lot of debate into every one of these because we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more after this. So, but if we're not interested in them, you can either don't make a motion or defeat the motion.
All right.
I mean, they're revenue streams, and they all add up, but there's nothing. This is, 100,000 here and 100,000 there. You know the story, but this isn't. This one item of a potential $100,000 isn't going to make or break the $8 million deficit.
Thank you.
Okay. I have who is up next? Councilman Ruckriegel was up next.
I guess my concern on including this in tonight is there's a lot of questions. I appreciate the motion on the floor. As it is currently stated, I'm not going to be able to support this just because there's too many open-ended questions. And I'm not sure that we will get all of those answered by the time that we get to the budget process. I think that when we're doing something like this, how do you define an alarm company? How do we make sure that, if a person to my left here installs alarm systems because he's my best friend, does he need to go get a permit? Is he a company? Is he not? There needs to be a lot of homework in these sort of issues before we bring this in my opinion. And at this point in time, I'm just not able to support it. But I look forward to further discussion on it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for beating this billing thing to death, but this goes back to our discussion earlier about the antiquated system, and my concern about this is that with the garbage bill, I don't know if we were not willing or not able to bill the tenant, but the bill always went to the property owner. And I don't want to see us unknowingly go down that same path. The same thing goes on with the sanitary district, and the homeowner gets the bill rather than the tenant, and then it's up to them to chase down how this bill gets paid.
Thank you. Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a follow-up question about how the $500 was determined for the alarm companies. That's just an annual fee for each alarm company? And is that what other communities charge? That's where it came from? Okay. Thank you.
I had Councilmember Montalongo next.
Thank you, Mayor. So my concerns with the permitting, and there's 2,000 residential. I'm just guessing the great majority of those numbers are going to be with residential, probably more seniors, more older technology people using that. As new technologies like Ring, doorbell are coming in and easier to install for people who are a little bit more tech savvy. And another question I had was concerning the alarm system. Is that only for companies who install that connect to the fire department, the police department, or can they install, if they have to, a Ring type system that doesn't call into police and fire?
This was designed to charge those alarm companies that install systems that tie into the police and fire department.
So if they install something else, they would not have to pay that fee?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Last call on this one. We have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Moore.
I do have a quick question. Councilmember Montalongo made me think of something when you talked about seniors. Are you talking about that one system? I don't know what it's called, but the commercial, I've fallen and I can't get up, where you press the button and it calls a service and they call the fire department. Is that included in this permit fee as well? Those individuals who have that kind of service where that service calls? Who's that?
David Tuttle is in the back.
I didn't know if that was, okay, thank you. So seniors with that system are safe, thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing more lights. Just for the record, I appreciate this one coming up for consideration. Way too many unanswered questions probably at this point in time. So, I think it's something important. There's something really important if we're really experiencing a significant number of false alarms that are taking our police officers and firefighters away from, but until we have that information, and until this one's cooked just a little bit better, I'm not going to be able to support this one tonight. Last call. I'm seeing no lights. Please cast your ballots. The motion's to accept the recommendation less the $25, correct? Okay. That motion fails with 4 ayes and 6 noes. Voting no, Mayor Ardis, Council Members Akeson, Moore, Riggenbach, Ruckriegel, and Turner. Okay, thank you. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. We will proceed with some of the ordinance changes for you. The next few items that we had to discuss with you were the revenues that we provided you report backs, and we listed the report backs there for you in terms of what they are, and if you want to include these, they were not built into the budget, so we need some direction from you if you want us to include this into the budget or not. The first was a plastic bag fee. This would be a 10-cent fee where the city would retain 6 cents. The retailers would keep 4 cents. It could generate, from an estimate of what Boulder, Colorado is doing, we think about $270,000 annually. And I just, at this point, I guess getting some direction from you on whether you want us to include that in the budget.
Councilwoman Akison?
So this would only be charged if you prefer to use plastic bags. So for people who take their own bags to the store, or for people who prefer the paper sacks, then they wouldn't be charged anything. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
If my memory serves me correctly, I believe that this was an item that Councilman Graham asked us to bring forward, so, okay, but he's not here. So I was just going to suggest that maybe we can put this one on for next Tuesday night, just so he has an opportunity. I don't know if he was supportive of it or not, but he put it out there as a potential. So if it was okay with the council, maybe maybe we can wait till Tuesday for this one, if that's okay. Everybody? Okay.
Sure. Next item was the vehicle sticker. This was at the request of Councilwoman Jensen. We put together some information looking at a $30 vehicle registration. We prorated it for seniors to $6 for seniors. And then we did find one community that did low income, and they used Social Security disability as that platform. So if you were on SSI getting disability payments, that's what they used as the category for determining whether or not you would qualify for the discount. That proposal, with the number of vehicles we had, we estimated that it would be a net increase of new revenue of $1.2 million. We did anticipate about $300,000 of additional staff costs that we would have to run this program, so that we would have to hire staff in order to do that. And I think we estimated $300,000 on the staffing, and then we built in an allowance for uncollectibles, I think at another 75, I think is what it was. So this is a net new revenue number. So if we were to do this, it would be closer to $1.6 million of revenue and about $400,000 of expense.
Okay. Anybody want to take a shot at this? Councilwoman Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, City Manager, for bringing this back. When I originally brought this forward during our last budget cycle 2 years ago, the thought was that we should use this to pay for some of the additional road work rather than raise property taxes. So, I would support doing a vehicle sticker if it was connected to road work. The way the budget is set up right now, it's not set up that way. But I think we should definitely keep this on our minds and keep it thinking about it for the future for road work and other things. Those are just my thoughts right now. I also, if you do have an exception for low income, I think you also have to include people that are, at the poverty level or below, and some people that get SSI. There's people that are low income that don't get SSI or disability.
The difficulty is, if we were to do that, I think then we'd have to hire a ton of, well, not a ton, but we'd have to have one person probably dedicated to just doing income verifications of individuals that came in saying that they were at the poverty level or below. So, and it would be pretty labor intensive as we start to get into that to try and ascertain that.
So I guess as a follow-up, my thought is if we were to, if there was a majority of the council who wanted to pursue this or support a vehicle sticker, is there a way then to move some of the money that we have set aside for road work in the current budget to something else?
Well, we right now, as we look at our road budget, we've got the $800,000 from the H taxes going in. You have $2 million that is from the debt service extension that we did, property tax extension that we did. You have a $1.2 million road levy that was established. So there's $3.2 million in property taxes. And then you have the motor fuel taxes that are generated, and that's what's funding our road program right now. Could you, money's somewhat fungible, but you could look at it as you could add to the program and put additional money into roads, or you could take this revenue and decide that you want to reduce the property tax by that, if that's what you wanted to do. I mean, so I think you could do one or two, but we don't have much in the unrestricted capital budget anymore that is road related, because we've kind of shifted that into the dedicated funding stream.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you is that it might be difficult to do that, to move the funding if we were to implement a vehicle sticker fee to something other than roads?
Because we've shifted back towards making sure that our road monies are used for roads, and that's what we're doing with it right now. So.
And they're all in dedicated?
Yes.
They're all dedicated funds just for roads?
Correct.
Mr. Manager, I mean, there's a way to do it, right? I mean, if somebody wants to make a motion to say, we want to do a vehicle sticker, we're going to put it in the roads, we can do it.
We can do it.
Yep.
But you could shift the money somewhere else that right now is dedicated to, I mean, in our proposed budget, dedicated to the roads?
Yeah, I think, if the council says put 1.2 million on a vehicle sticker and
Put it to roads.
with direction to put it for roads, we can do that.
Yes.
But we have to have a motion and a second to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So the answer then is yes rather than no?
Yes. I mean, I think you can. It just depends. If the direction is you want to put $1.2 million in, we'll put $1.2 million in. I don't know if I can take any other revenues away.
Or move them somewhere else, is my question.
I don't think I can move them someplace else.
And then where we're at right now with what's been, I know we're just starting the voting, but with the proposed budget, what's our deficit at with what you're proposing?
The budget that we have presented to you anticipates that we'll put $1.5 million back into the general fund balance in 2018, and then $500,000 in 2019.
Thank you.
Okay, I had Councilwoman Moore next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not of the opinion that a vehicle sticker is the best way to go about raising additional revenue. Now, adding and subtracting, I can do basic math. I see it brings in $1.2 million. But my contention in the past is the same as today, is that this is the type of fee that hits lower income individuals more heavily than others. Perhaps most of us around the horseshoe and in this room could afford the extra $30 a year. And I say perhaps because I don't know what your budget is like. I don't know if you've got 5 kids in college and you're eating beans and franks every night. Just because you live in a big house doesn't mean you have a lot of money. But I don't believe this is something that we need to level on our citizens. Just those top items that we dealt with tonight, we're already adding another $11 a month to those who have to pay it. Looking in our society and what we do impacts everybody. We have to look at what we're doing in totality. We can't look at it in a vacuum. Oh, it's just $30. Because these same individuals that I'm talking about are about to lose their Affordable Care Act coverage. Okay, same people. And so as we nickel and dime them tonight through our budget, and let me say, I appreciate the fact that we have a budget issue. We're talking about shared sacrifice. There's just no way around it. There's just no way around it. But in doing this, you don't know if this is the tipping point for someone who can't afford it. On average, in the report it indicated for the vehicle sticker, on average, there's two cars per household. I'm glad that was an average, because an average means in some households there is no car, in which case there wouldn't be a sticker fee. Or maybe there's one car that's shared by 3 adults trying to get to work. And if they're sharing a car, then their public transportation, I believe our public transportation system has seen an increase in ridership. There's a reason for that. And I'm sure this $30, some households can pull back on some things, I'm sure. There may be some luxury item like, milk or diapers they could pull back on and pay the $30. I'm glad to see that we're going to make sure the main branch library has a efficient cooling system, so when they can't get around, they can at least go into the library and sit down and cool off. But basically, this is not the type of fee that bodes well for the low-income community. And I'm not going to even say minority community, because there's a lot of folks across the spectrum who have low-income jobs, low-wage jobs, working 2 or 3 jobs. I'm not in favor of it. I think it would be bad for our citizens, not to mention those who have, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. How does it hit those companies that have fleet vehicles? $30 a vehicle, that's, if you've got a couple hundred cars or 100 cars that you have out there, that's a big hit to your bottom line if you have a company that has fleet vehicles. But primarily, we're talking about the underemployed, the unemployed, another $30 after everything else we're going to add on, and we're not done yet. I think it's would not be welcomed in the community, and I cannot support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe just to potentially shorten up this discussion, because we have several items, let's start these with a motion. If somebody wants to put a motion on the floor, just to have the discussion. But if there's no interest in this, then there won't be a motion and we'll move along. So if I have Councilmember Rucker-Regal and Euler, I'm glad to have you speak to it, but if you don't want to put a motion on the floor, maybe we can just save some time. I had Councilman Rucker-Regal next.
Thank you, Mayor, but I think it's important we talk about especially this one, because it keeps resurfacing. And if I may, Councilmember Moore, in full support of exactly what you said. I did a little quick math today. This is one of the most regressive taxes that we could be putting on our citizens. Fines, fees, levies, taxes, call them whatever you want, but it's what our people pay. I'm going to take an average house. If they have one car, they're paying $306 to the city. That's what the city gets out of the tax bill. This is basically a 9.8% tax increase on what they pay to the city for one car. 2 cars, it goes to 16.6. In 61605, where the average house price is $40,000, and they're paying $122 to the city for taxes, one car, if they're paying it the $30 fee, is a 24.5% tax increase to the city. If they have 2, it's 49%. 61603, we're going to 13% and 27%. And it's something that, unlike the tax bill, is not even a tax write-off on their income tax like it would be if it would be taxes. We haven't figured in the police enforcement time on this. I don't think it's going to go well for our citizens right now who may have some issues on where we're trying to build some trust with the police department and citizens to be able to have another possibility of being pulled over when you haven't paid your vehicle's sticker tax, or if you've forgotten, or if you haven't gotten it updated. And then to say that we're going to take this money and replace it in the budget and take it out of the roads where, I don't know, I get tons of calls from citizens all over the city, and I heard a term recently where they were calling the potholes, and this may be true, inverted speed bumps, because it might be the only thing that slows some people down in some neighborhoods. So if we are going to use that as a replacement, this becomes basically a lottery on education the way the state of Illinois did, and we didn't get education funded properly. So I guess we keep revisiting this, but the facts are the facts. Call it a fee, tax, fine, wheel, and that's just compared to the homeowners. This also then hits our renters as well, and our fleets. Day in, day out, we've got to be looking out for the citizens, and we've got to take this in totality. To me, this is a huge, just the conversation is a huge tax increase conversation. Thank you.
Okay. No motion. We're moving to the next one. Mr. Manager?
Thank you. The next item was brought up by Councilman Montalongo. That was in report back number 49, and that is the business registration fee. Looking at that, we looked at it, that a $25 fee would generate $200,000. A $100 fee would generate roughly $800,000 of new revenue.
Okay. Councilman Montalongo, did you want to speak to this? Okay.
First, I'd start off with a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, seconded by Councilwoman Agason.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I think this is a pro-business type thing that we need in our community. Right now, we don't know the number of businesses exactly that we have. We can't communicate with them. We don't know the business owners. And it really came to mind when we were putting together our business roundtable. I'm like, oh, so who are all the businesses in this area here? We could not, unless we went door to door, that's how we're going to get that information on who they are. Some of them own the property, some of them are renting properties, and it changes. So how do we keep track of the businesses that we have in our community, and how do we plan with them to help them grow their business? And that's exactly what I was trying to do, but was deterred once again, a system that we didn't have in place to be able to simply communicate with them, invite them to a business meeting where we could talk about growing their business. I think other areas too, it helps with our planning with police, fire, and public works. And I'm really supportive overall just of being able to try and rally our businesses to do better here in Peoria. So I think this is something positive. It'll help us start tracking and communicating with our businesses.
Okay. The only question I have is the amount. It had 25 and it had 100. Maybe split it. I mean, $50 doesn't seem like a crazy number. Would generate 400,000, but we need to specify what that's going to be.
Before I make that number, I just would like to ask the city manager, or if, I don't think the assistant city manager is here, but just if we had any feedback from the chamber on an acceptable amount.
The chamber is still soliciting some feedback from the board of the chamber, and said that he would solicit their opinions and get back to us, but we have nothing further back from the chamber.
Okay, so with that, I would say for this next year, $50.
And is that okay with the seconder? Okay. Thank you. I had Councilmember Ruckriegel next.
All right. Be great to have a list of all of our businesses. A couple of questions, I guess, on this is, and maybe city manager can help me a little bit. What constitutes a business? Our next door neighbor who has a small little office that she's doing a little sales out of, is that a business? Does that need to register? What about the person selling Avon? The guy who's cutting grass on a Saturday because it's his second or in some case third job. And I guess my concern again comes from it's death by 1,000 taxes. We've got a structural problem with our budget. We don't face. So we keep coming in with these little fees, as if they don't add up. I can tell you how many pizzas I've got to sell to be able to make $50 on the bottom line, to be able to pay $50. It doesn't come off the top line. Business people who operate their businesses know that. You know how many hamburgers you've got to sell. As my Chinese friend who has a restaurant here says, who has to hand wrap $1 egg rolls to be able to sell, but she knows she doesn't get $1 for each egg roll, a profit. It's much less than that. It's 15, 20 cents. And her answer always is, that's a lot of egg rolls. So these fees add up over time. And I think that while maybe good intentions, and it'd be great to be able to have this, we've not even said whether this is going to go into economic development, if this is going to go into the general fund, where this is going to go. And I just think that we're probably ahead of the game on putting something like this into play, because I think it's a gap filler versus a real plan on where this dollars would go and what it would do. But I also think that every time we increase a fee on a business, especially small business, we keep people out of the market. We try to tell people not to get into the market, and we've got to be extremely careful on that.
Okay. I have Councilmember Euler next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily against the concept, but I do have a couple questions how it would be operated. I'll use myself as an example. As a realtor, I'm self-employed, and so I am my own business. And are we just charging the brokerage that I hang my license at, or do I have to pay a fee as well, being self-employed? And then from the landlord perspective, I'm charged a fee by the city for every rental house that I own. Am I also then charged a fee as an employer or a business because I own those houses and I file them under a business as my taxes?
I think that we could certainly research that item and get you an answer back, but I would think that that we would look at trying to establish this by modeling it based on what other business licenses that other communities have. And most will take into consideration the, from a home occupation on up, the business owner that is operating that business. In your specific case, where you're a realtor that has your license hanging in a brokerage firm, I would think that it would still, it would be both that brokerage firm would have that license, and then if you're operating a business directly, we would be charging you as well. But again, I'd want to look at that and make sure that we've got all of that covered by any ordinance that we would create. We don't have that information in terms of what other communities have done. We would look at that, research it, and get it to you. So.
Next up, I have Councilman Turner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is kind of an interesting one because when the mayor was sitting out here beside me about a half a century ago, I brought this up for the same reasons that we're discussing it today. And we wanted to keep track of existing businesses. There were also some negative type businesses that we really didn't need in the community that we thought would be a good way to get rid of them, et cetera, because we'd have some control by implementing a $5, at that time it was $5, license fee, and we could then, if they didn't do what we wanted them to do, we could pull the license fee or take the license away from them. But what happened is that I can't believe the negative impact that we got from the business people in this community about doing such. And it was only $5 at that time. So if we think of it as 25 today, by a week from now, the Journal-Star will have plenty to say about that, and we'll all feel the pain. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I have Councilman Sear next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to agree 100% with Councilman Rodrigo comments. Just a couple more comments for our city manager. $100 might be or might not be a lot of money for small businesses, but I know that right now all small businesses pay a $100 fee to the state of Illinois. So another $100 is really a 100% increase, which to me, in my business, that's what we look at, percentages. So we're asking small businesses, or we want to give them a 100% increase on the business fee that they already pay $100 right now to the state of Illinois. Second comment would be, do we have access to the state of Illinois database? Because I pay these fees all the time, so they know my names in there. So do we share information with the state of Illinois?
We would be able to get the information from the state and try and coordinate it through that.
So if we want to track businesses, we could just go to the state of Illinois. We would know exactly who has paid those fees, and we would know how many small businesses we have in our city, correct?
What I'm saying is that we would be able to coordinate. I don't know if we can get all the information out of the state in terms of what that business is and what they're doing, but
I just wouldn't be able to support a 100% increase.
Okay. The motion was for $50, just clarification. Okay. Councilwoman Nixon, I had your light, but.
Yeah, I canceled my request, but I think that the focus, this has been brought up times before, and I know that there's been a lot of pushback, but I think, again, we can't manage what we don't measure, and it's very difficult for us to even quantify how many businesses in a certain category we have. We have no way of, or at least we're not doing it currently, of being a conduit for businesses that are similar to leverage their impact if they were given an opportunity to collectively work together. We're missing all sorts of opportunities because we don't communicate with them. We don't have a way to do that. And I see Councilman Rodrigo's questioning that. Okay, so if you wanted to get a business association put together of all the businesses on Knoxville, right now, I can ask the city manager, how easy is that to do?
well, I think that if we wanted to get that list, we would start by trying to pull all the we'd do a windshield survey and start.
The answer is we don't have the information. So even if we said, let's just say no fee, let's work towards getting a registration of all the businesses, find out what they're in business for, how many employees they have, get their contact information so that when we need to contact them, we can. It's mind-boggling that we resist these ideas, and you can look at it from the positive standpoint of how beneficial it would be for all. I don't want to single out any sort of business, but let's just say you wanted to have a meeting of all the mom and pop restaurants in town, not franchises, just all the mom and pop restaurants. We couldn't do that today. Am I right, Mr. City Manager?
It would be difficult.
So if we wanted to get everyone together to say, let's work on a marketing campaign to make Peoria a destination because we have more farm-to-table restaurants than most other cities in Illinois, we can't do that. And the reason we don't do it is because we don't collect the data. I mean, I don't understand why we're so resistant to this. We come up with all these explanations. It's going to be too taxing, too hard. I'm kind of mystified. It's like, I wish Graham were here because it's another example of how bifurcated our brains are. At one hand, we want us to be a thriving city that's a magnet for people, but we resist the ideas that will help us get there. So, and everything costs something. And I think that the businesses, if they watched it deployed properly, and it would give a shot in the arm to our economic development department, it would put some tools in their toolbox. And it's you know, I've been a part of these conversations before, and when you ask the question, let's get these people together, it is too much work. So, I don't know, I'm very supportive I'm supportive of a registration. I'm ambivalent about the amount of money, but I think that we really need to get businesses registered so that we know how many of XYZ businesses we have, and we might discover that we've got a few that are lacking, categories that we don't have any representation of. So, you know, I'm very supportive of this, and I'm kind of surprised. I would be surprised. I'll be very disappointed if it fails.
Okay.
Thank you.
And maybe if there would be some consideration by the maker of the motion and the seconder, if we were to, I mean, this is a fee that's going to hit business. So maybe kind of along the lines where some of this discussion has been going outside of the people that just don't support it, maybe we look at directing the revenues off of this to be used for economic development, for business. I mean, whatever that spend will still have to come back to us. We're not giving them a blank check to spend, but maybe we dedicate this money for economic development, whatever that might be. I think I would probably have an easier time with that. At least it's justification back to the businesses that we're going to be hitting, that, you know, it's not just a way for us to potentially identify more businesses, but it's also a way that we will be able to hopefully increase business and do more for them. Councilman?
Mayor, I absolutely support that because, I mean, that's what the intention is, and that's where the challenges I faced here, just putting this roundtable together and wanting to communicate with them more. And, you know, I just like to add for the comment of the company that makes egg rolls. I mean, it may be a huge opportunity for them that some other business wants to connect with them here in town, but can't because they don't know who they are. They're a small business in one part of the town that it could be a big business opportunity for them. I just think we're really missing it. Just one of those things that's holding us back and keeping us in the dark. So I would be really supportive of it going towards economic development.
Okay. Seconder? So the motion would be to approve $50 fee with revenues dedicated to economic development. Is that correct? Okay. I have Councilman Riggenbach next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the amending the motion kind of adjusts my train of thought on this. But, Mr. Manager, I think it's really important that in the next week that we get some feedback from the chamber, and I know you've reached out to them, but let's make sure we light a fire under them, if so to speak, to get kind of their feel on this, because I see a lot of advantages to it, as Councilman Montalago and Akeson have mentioned, but I also see some immediate pushback as well. So if we could get some clarity what other communities, and you've got a list of 4 or 5 in the report back, how they've dealt with things like landlords. You know, if I'm like Councilman Euler owned 3 or 4 rental properties, is that a business? And how is that defined? I think we need that clarity before we take the final step, at least on my behalf. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I had Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your adding that clarity on economic development opportunities. I think that would make it a little more palatable. We're talking about talking to the chamber, and that's a wonderful thing. A lot of businesses are not part of the chamber. And so at the minimum to go into the chamber, it's $300. But someone who's making the egg rolls, I don't know if she's part of the chamber, but perhaps she would see the benefit of the $50 because she see what she's going to get in return. It's not like she's just throwing it out of the window. Those who own businesses or have multiple properties very clearly understand that they are a business. If you're following Schedule C or some other thing and you're and getting income, you know you're a business. That's easy. Whether you want to pay the fee or not, registration, that's a different story. It's your prerogative. But I do very clearly understand how important it would be to, whether we charge a fee or not. I think if we took this conversation out of the revenue stream and asked everyone around the horseshoe, would it be a good idea to know the businesses that are in our city? I think we probably would all say yes. And that's where I am. I would really like to know from a business registration who the businesses are in our city for the reasons that Councilmember Montalongo articulated. Now, if in following that logic, if we say, well, there's a cost to that because somebody's got to put it in a system, manage the system or whatever, and it's at the end of the day, it's $6.75 per business as a cost to that, then I would want to cover that cost for doing that. But then additionally, if, as the mayor indicated, there is some economic development opportunity that those businesses receive, maybe we talk about wayfinding signs in a certain community for small, I'm thinking of Wisconsin Avenue now, maybe there's wayfinding signs for those commercial districts or somewhere along Western, or those businesses know they're going to get something back. It may be more palatable. So I'm inclined to be in favor of a registration with the fee going specifically to an economic development opportunity that we further define. Maybe we don't, before it's enacted, we make sure that we clearly are able to delineate to the members who are paying it what it's going to be used for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I support the having a business registration. The only thing I question is what the fee should be. So I think it would be helpful, like Councilman Riggenbach said, to make sure we get that information back from the chamber and more input on what is the proper fee and what would be the most fair and would make the most sense. So I'll support the motion tonight with that caveat, because I'm not certain if we know if $50 is really the right amount that should be charged. And I know you said that you were waiting for feedback from the chamber and others, so I think that would be helpful. So if that may have to change, I guess, when we vote on the final budget. Thank you.
Okay. I have Councilmember Ruckriegel next.
Thank you, Mayor. On the economic development money, will this money be in addition to any dollars that we currently have budgeted in economic development? Will this be an additional amount targeted towards that?
This would be additional.
Okay. And will we be able to get a directive on what economic development is? Because I've talked to quite a few restaurant owners. I've asked them about this fee since this idea came up. And the one answer I got that sticks with me is I got asked by a restaurant owner, well, is this fee going to go to other economic development, such as giving a developer the ability to have a competition against me by one restaurant? So I think we need to define what economic development really is and where this goes. Because this would be right now about $400,000, which is more than we have, but not a lot to do with. And so it's not a feel-good. It needs to be able to actually show some results. Because if we're going to invest this by the businesses, I think it ought to be able to show some true results from a lot of businesses. I will tell you what most businesses will tell you. They will say, let me do my thing. They don't need help being connected because they've got the chamber. They will make those connections. The lady who makes the egg rolls, she does her own marketing. She does a great business. She's on her third restaurant actually right now. So to her, this is going to be a burden because it's not something she asked for. If she wants to join something voluntarily, she can do that. And so I think, again, when we have the priorities of roads, public safety, those things, that's where our gear really ought to be right now. But I can appreciate that my colleagues may disagree with me, and I hope that if this does pass, that there shows some return on the investment. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Sear next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify something for Councilman Montalongo and Akeson. I mean, being the 5th District Councilman, I'm also very, very frustrated. The fact that I cannot have the information how many restaurants are in the 5th District. So I'm also very frustrated about the lack of information that we have. But I want to also be very careful that for $50, we're talking about $50 now, who would we share this information with, Mr. Urich? And are we competing, would we be competing against the Chamber of Commerce? Because, no, I mean, personally, owning some businesses, if I don't need to be a member, if I'm getting the same information for $50 instead of my fee for the Chamber of Commerce, I mean, I think that'd be a big problem. So who would have information the information for $50?
The information that we would be generating, we would be using as we develop and target our economic development programs. I mean, I think that's part of what you want to know is the types, as Councilman Montalongo mentioned, it's what are the types of businesses in the area? What do we need to do to grow more businesses that are employing people at whatever number you want to set your target at, and looking at what we can do to try and attract more businesses in that same area. So it would be more for the internal side than it would for anything else. So,
do we subsidize any money right now to the Chamber of Commerce?
We are a chamber member, but that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Montalongo next.
Thank you, Mayor. I think another part to this is for any of those businesses like the restaurants, we should probably exempt them if they're already paying a fee into the city. So we're not hitting them multiple times if we can still gather that information for them. I mean, still register, but not hitting them with additional fees.
Okay. That was second of the motion, and agreed with that modification. Do we have anyone left? I have no lights up here, but Councilwoman Jensen?
My question's related to that. Like, for instance, property landlords already have to register their properties, and we have a registration of them. So shouldn't they be exempt from this? Is not the type of business that would be included.
I think we would look to
so they don't get charged
landlord,
twice
right,
to register. Okay.
No double dips. Okay. My screen shows no lights. That would indicate no further discussion. So we have a motion and a second. It's a $50 fee that will be revenue dedicated towards economic development. Okay. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes with 6 ayes, 3 noes, and an abstention. Voting no, council members Sear, Ruckriegel, and Turner, and abstention, Councilman Euler. Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In report back number 5-4, we had for you some various fees from the fire department as they looked at some revenues that they might be able to increase for a number of different permits. We had a schedule that they laid out of increasing the hazmat fees, increasing the permits for fireworks or flame events, increasing the fees for fire protection, the fire protection fee for a non-resident, the fire report, any reports, the fee would be increased. They looked at the fire tents. They inspect tents at different events to make sure that they've been put up safely, looking at raising those fees. Then they had some fees for compliance of fire protection systems as well, and those were included. The fees ranged depending on if we wanted to go with the more comprehensive fire protection permit. It ranged from $188,000 to $305,000 of new revenue.
Okay. If anyone would like to put a motion on the floor to begin discussion on any of these items. Otherwise, we'll move along. Seeing no lights, Mr. Manager. If anybody wants to make a motion to begin discussion on any of these items, otherwise we'll move along to the next. Okay, Councilmember Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Last call on a second. That motion would fail for a lack of a second on this item. Okay, Mr. Manager.
The last revenue item that we wanted to discuss with you this evening was the amusement tax. This was raised by Councilman Graves, so if we wanted to defer this item, I guess we could, but it was, if we looked at a 1% increase in the amusement tax, how much would that generate? It would generate about $491,000 if we were to look at a 1% increase. We did not look at the base of who is charging this. We just simply looked at what a 1% increase might look like.
I will call on Councilmember Sear.
Approve.
Motion to approve?
Yes.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Akison. Discussion on the item? Councilwoman Jensen.
I just had a question. This is the one that Councilman Grab wanted to move forward with? Okay. I guess I just would prefer to wait maybe until he's here.
Sure.
To discuss it further, but that's okay.
Seeing no lights for discussion or a substitute motion to defer until Tuesday. Okay. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes, 8 ayes, 2 nays, voting no, Council members Jensen and Ruckriegel. Mr. Manager?
Thank you. That was the gist of what I wanted to walk through this evening, unless council has any other items that they want to discuss specifically about the budget. We do have some more report backs that we would bring to you on the 31st. What we would also do is on the revenue items that we have, that we had anticipated as part of the budget, we'll have first reading resolutions for you to adopt. The business license discussion that we just had this evening is going to take a little bit of time to craft it, and I want to make sure I incorporate everything, so I don't think we'll have that ready for Tuesday. But it's still, since it wouldn't go into effect till the first of the year, the timing would still be there for us to go forward with it. And since it's not really, it's not filling any of the current budget gaps, since the money is being dedicated to economic development, I think we have some time to work on crafting that. The plan would then be then on Tuesday evening that we would continue the council discussion pertaining to the budget, and then hopefully we'll be able to kind of pull everything together to put a package together for you to adopt on November 7th.
The discussion isn't necessarily finished tonight. If there's anything that anyone wants to bring up for consideration, we can do that. Probably can't stress enough how important it is that anything that anyone's thinking about having included in this budget, that you relay that to the manager so it's included on Tuesday. Because the intention with the calendar that we have is when we leave the special meeting next Tuesday, he will have direction on bringing back a balanced budget to vote on November 7th. So really important that anything you're thinking about, make sure you get it on the table so we have time. We don't want to come up with a big item next Tuesday and need to come back for information a week later when, unless we want to, keep moving the discussion down the road. So also keep in mind that all of these potential decisions that we made tonight are going to be used by the manager to come back. None of this is final action. We haven't raised anything yet. We haven't taken those items out of the capital part of the budget yet. That vote will come. These are all recommendation votes to give the manager an idea of where a consensus of the council is. So I was trying to buy anybody time that wanted to look for something else to talk about tonight. If I'm assuming that is not happening because I did. There's a light.
So at the next meeting on the 31st, you're also going to bring back your recommendations on the fire department?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I'm seeing no further lights. Madam Clerk?
We're at public comment regarding the proposed 2018-19 biennial budget.
This is a slot for any public feedback or discussion regarding the budget for next year. 99.9% of our audience is staff. But you're welcome to. Okay. And while we're on that, I'll mention it because we're going to adjourn here. I've mentioned it at the previous meetings, how much the council appreciates all the work that the manager and staff puts into this. It's almost, I had several comments after the meeting Tuesday. Well, I had more than several comments about the meeting, but in regards to the budget discussion and the information, people were extremely impressed at the volume of report back informations that our staff turned around for us in a week, let alone the weeks before. But the amount of additional requests for information that staff was able to turn around and come back to us with really good information was very good, and it speaks to the caliber of the manager and our staff. And I just want to tell everybody that you don't hear it often enough, but we sincerely appreciate the hard work that you all do. And all these extra budget meetings that we're doing this year to try to encourage that discussion is it's not lost on the council members. So, Mr. Manager, and to your staff, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, I believe we would be at adjournment. Councilwoman Akeson.
Pardon me, before we adjourn, we received an email, I think all the council members did, from citizens that were expecting to have a chance to speak to a agenda item, and they requested that someone who voted in the affirmative request a request to reconsider, and I would like to bring that forward, item number 17-322 for our next business meeting, regular scheduled meeting in November. Can I do that tonight?
We can put that item on an agenda. It has to be reconsidered at the next regularly scheduled.
Right, that's what I just said.
I would like to ask legal counsel here, but this is a special meeting and unfinished business is not listed, so can we do this at this meeting?
Well,
Proper procedure will be at the next regularly scheduled meeting, the council member could then make her motion for reconsideration.
Okay, okay, fine. All right, thank you for that clarification. Happy to do that.
okay, thank you. So, do we have citizens to address on this?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we would be at citizens to address, and I don't have any.
Okay.
But if there's any citizens that would like to address us, even though you didn't turn in a card, okay, seeing none,
We have no executive session, so we are
okay,
at
then
adjournment.
we are at adjournment, so we get to have one more vote tonight. Motion to adjourn by Councilman Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilman Euler. Please cast your ballots to adjourn. That motion passes unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned.
I might do some of that tonight with a bourbon in my hand.
Got a bottle of Buffalo Trace in my car.
Yeah, I've got a.
Thank you. Hey, Chris. I got home at 10 after 10, and I got nowhere close to emails. Sorry. Yeah. And really, I mean, there's a ton of this, as you know, I mean, there's a ton of talk about that out there. But, you know, I mean, I can honestly say, I mean, they can tell me all they want, or Patrick or whoever, but, so I would be hesitant to say that there's something on the table.